you go. So one question that I mentioned to the guys off stage or backstage is, how do you determine the correct crossover? And so I think in the industry, we generally are told, 80 hertz crossovers is a good starting point. But how do you know when to do 70, 75, 60 hertz, or even 50 hertz? Just because your speakers can handle lower frequency, and they have a lower frequency response, does that mean you need to, go a lot lower than 80? And so this is legitimately a question that I don't have an answer to. I don't know how do you determine the correct, currently with my JTR front sound stage, I'm setting it at 60 hertz, but that was just because that was a recommendation from the guy that built these. He said, hey, 60 hertz is probably a good safe, for these, but how do you know whether or not 65 isn't better or 70? And so I'm going to throw it out to you guys because, again, I don't have the answer to this. And I'd love to know in the chat, how many of you systematically figure out what your best crossover is, or do you just arbitrarily guess? How do you determine what crossover to use? I'd love for you guys to share in the chat as we kind of have this conversation. So what do you think, guys?
On Den and Marantz, you have to be at like what? By 20s, right? Don't you go like 40, 60, 80? You can't choose like 70.
So. I don't think you can choose 50 or 55 or anything like that.
So in increments of 10.
Yeah. Thanks for the super chat, FOMO.
What's up,
FOMO? What's happening? Q is
ladies and gentlemen,
guys.
FOMO's in the house. If you have any TV questions, just go ahead and ask them in the chat.
I'm gonna come see you soon, FOMO. Have my stuff ready.
But FOMO, that's kind of threatening.
FOMO, I heard
no.
No.
We have some business deals going on here.
That's right.
He had a large crowd on his last live stream, man. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Thank you for allowing me to be on the live stream, FOMO. It was a great one. It was myself, Brandon, B the installer, and FOMO. It was great.
Oh, that's good combo.
Super cool, man.
Yeah.
So how do you determine the correct crossover? All right, so you can only go with 20, not down to 20, but 40, 60, 80, 100, 120. I think that's how it goes. All the way up to like what? How high does it go on Denon and Marantz?
It goes up to like 120.
It's either 120 or 150, something like that.
Oh, you know what? I think it'll go to 150. I think it goes up to 150.
All right. So I think 80 hertz is what the recommended is, just because I think THX, and also that's a safe place where the bass becomes omnidirectional and you shouldn't be able to figure out where it's coming from.
Right.
Unless it's like chuffing or rattling something, and then you'll know where it's coming from. But for the most part, you're not supposed to be able to tell where it's coming from around.
Correct.
Everybody has a different number, 100, 80, but 80 I think is a pretty safe spot, right? So I think that's where it came from. Now, a lot of 2-channel audio guys like to say, let your main speakers go down to as low as they can naturally play, and then let the sub take over from there. Mm-hmm. Right? So that's what I've heard from some of those guys. And that kind of makes sense to me, just because, like, let's say if your subs go down to, or your main speakers go down to 40 hertz, right? At least down to 40 hertz, you may have you have 2 speakers instead of 1, right? So you may have less interactions. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I mean, I made a video about this, and I found 60 hertz to be great with my, at the time it was Eclipse RF73s, which have dual 10s. Mm-hmm. So yeah, might as well. Why cut them off at the knees at 80 hertz when they can go down to like 38 or something? Let's put it at 40. I ended up, I think at 60. Now, the one thing that you'll notice when this happens is that if you are running it off of an AV receiver, you're going to take more power from that AV receiver. If you have an external power amplifier, then those speakers are going to, then do it, because you have that extra power. But when you do, if you do have towers and you had them at 80 hertz and you bring them down to 60 or 50 or 40 or whatever, it's going to draw more power from the AV receivers. So those of you with AV receivers, maybe you can try it, but you're going to, and then again, I don't know if you're going to notice like power being removed from the other speakers or what have you. Like, it could just be a overall like dimming of the volume, maybe, or it's hard to describe. But if you have an external amplifier, yeah, I'd say go for it, because if you want to hear more bass coming out of those towers that you probably spent a lot of money on, do it. And didn't
So-
what does Chris Wyndham mean here? I'll throw it over to Aaron when he says not a brick wall. I think I know what he's saying.
Yeah.
Is he talking about the crossover slope?
Yeah. I'm sure it's probably 24 decibel per octave. I think that's standard, right, on AVR.
So break that in
part.
layman's terms, though. What does that mean?
Yeah, it's
24
just
decibels
like
per
if you
octave.
say I'm going to cross a speaker at if this is going toward the low end, so you say I'm going to cross the mains at 80 hertz. Well, it doesn't mean only 80 hertz and above gets to the mains. It means a portion of below 80 hertz still gets the mains, because when you cross it off, you're basically saying, all right, speaker, I want you to play 80 hertz and above, but I don't have a filter that is a brick wall that stops like a solid line.
Right.
There's a little bit more. So it may still play like for every octave. So 80 hertz, half of that is 40. So at 40 hertz, it'll be playing 24 dB down, which is a little bit not quite right. It's somewhere within that range.
Okay.
Of LR slopes.
It's not an exact.
Yeah, they're like
it's a slope
crossover, right? And then 24 dB down from that. So, but yeah, that's what he's talking about. So my opinion on this is, for me, it's a mixture of what the speaker can handle and what the room is doing. So, for example, you may have a set of tower speakers that do great down to 60 hertz. They have plenty of output. They still match up to a subwoofer just fine. Everything's linear there. It's great. No issues, thermal issues at all. No compression, nothing like that. No distortion. But you've got a 60 hertz, or let's say a 70 hertz suck out, where the main speakers are. So what are you going to do about that? Well, you use your subwoofers to help fill in, because your subwoofers aren't at the exact same location as your mains. You may have one up front in the center. You may have one back here. That gets into the whole, distributing the mid bass and bass region stuff. But that's why I would just say it depends on the output capability of the speaker and the room itself. And one of those two may override the other, but that's kind of my opinion. But then there are also people who don't just cross over at a particular, they don't say, I'm going to make my crossover region 80 hertz, acoustically. They say, I'm going to let my mains run down to 50, and I'm going to cross my subwoofer at 80, and I'm going to have some overlap. And that also goes into distributing the modes of the room, all the peaks and dips and stuff that you get just from cancellations within the room. So there is no technical dead on right answer. It is a little bit of trial and error.
So that sounds so kind of what I'm hearing. Chana says I kind of do it by ear. I'm listening. I see what I like. I see what sounds good to my ears in my room at 70 hertz and 60 hertz or whatever it is, and 40 hertz. And then Aaron's saying, hey, I take some measurements, look at the frequency response. And if I've got a dip, a null, or a suck out in certain frequencies, then I can adjust a crossover to try to hand that off to my subs, because they're in a different location. And because they're in a different location, they're going to probably generate a different frequency response. And maybe I won't have that dip in there, and it'll kind of level that out. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah.
Now, let's say if you only have one sub, right? Yeah. And we're talking about a dip in, maybe 60 hertz, right? It seems to me that isn't it possible that you'd get more of an issue depending on where your sub is placed? Just because there's one sub, right? Versus, let's say you have two speakers and your main speakers are actually doing better because, they're in a different place and you have two of them.
Right. And that would be where you would want to start moving your sub around to try to get there is no absolute best. It's the most optimal, like the best one I can get with what I have.
Right.
And so I guess my question isn't like, okay, which one should everybody use? Because there's nothing that you can say that will match everybody's situation, everybody's setup, and everybody's room acoustics. My main question was like, how do you determine what's best for my room? What's best for your room? And I think it kind of goes back to what I've always told people with subwoofers. Are like, should I get one larger subwoofer or two smaller ones? And I always tell them the reality is the only way you're going to know is by measuring them, and they'll say, where should I put my subwoofer if I've got one or two? Again, you just got to try it, measure it, see what gets the best frequency response. There's not a dead set. If you do this, you're going to get this kind of response. I think that's the same case with crossovers.
Absolutely. Just wanted to say quick thanks to Thomas, by the way. And you know what? I think what the answer is, I think, is like you're saying, it depends, right? So if you have only one sub, maybe your two main speakers are going to have a smoother bass response, and so you would only know by actually measuring with REW and a U mic 1, because you're not going to get that data just using your AVR. It's not going to tell you that, right? It'll tell you, it's always going to tell you to cross over at whatever the minus 6 or minus 3 dB point is, and so that's what Odyssey is going to say, and then everybody else will tell you to cross it over at 80, but it still might not be optimal, right? You want to see if you have, let's say if your single sub is having issue and your main speakers can handle it, let them handle it. I think that would probably be better, and let the sub handle the frequencies that the
really
mains can.
LFBs, right? The really low stuff, yeah.
But then when you get into having multiple subs, though, let's say if you have two and all of them have no issue playing all those frequencies, no issues with room modes, then at that point it's like, okay, maybe let your subs do their thing. I mean, I'm doing something crazy where I'm letting the subs do their thing, I'm letting the speakers do their thing, and I'm using software to allow them to really mesh together in the best way possible. But most people aren't going to do that. Right. We're getting into some really advanced stuff with multi-sub optimizer and like some pretty expensive like Dirac stuff, and it's getting a little bit crazy at that point.
I always thought it was kind of interesting when I had my Clips La Scalas, Odyssey would set my left and right speakers at like 40 hertz, but then it would set my center channel, which is identical, at 60 hertz. And I was like, that seems weird to me.
Yeah, like
but
Odyssey
almost
will do
always
that.
did that. And I was like,
It'll do that sometimes. Even with my height channels, which are all the the prime elevation speakers from SVS, it'll put the two front ones at 120 and the two rear ones at large. I'm like, what are you doing? And so I'm attributing that to since they're at the ceiling mounted on beams, there's probably something bumping around up there that the microphone is hearing, and it's causing him to act that way. So
gotcha.
I don't know.
Here's a thought I had. I don't know if you guys know the answer to this, but Odyssey does a full range sweep of each speaker, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you were to just run all of your speakers full range, would they interact in a way that's good? Like, do they take that into account when they give the PEQ settings, that if you were to just use them all together, are they going to mesh well together? I don't know the answer to that. Yeah. I haven't measured that. Does that make sense? What my question is?
Am I clear about what they mean? All speakers. You're talking like your mains.
So let's just say this
are large.
Let's just say
all of them set to large.
Yeah. Let's just say exactly. I set everything to large. Let's say I say no sub. I have no sub, right? Let's just pretend.
Okay. Yeah.
And then so it's going to EQ each one, but are they taking into account how they're all going to mesh together, or are they just optimizing for each individual one? Because now that's totally different, right?
Right.
Than seeing how the bass is going to interact all together.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that.
That's a different story. Yeah. Unless it's got the smarts to figure it out based on each of the impulse responses that it measures. I doubt it.
Wife and kids are here.
That's good. Man.
Hey.
They're excited about their new house.
You want a McDonald's?
They're moving in across the street.
Who's that?
Another family.
Oh, nice.
Oh, nice.
Oh,
you
got neighbors already.
The neighbors already, yeah.
You should give them a speaker as like a housewarming.
Yeah. Do that.
Here's a pair of speakers. I got tons of this stuff.
Yeah, I would. I might.
Coming out
give them that microphone with a little fuzzy thing on the top,
Yeah. We have like a grassy area where it's kind of like a community spot where you can have like a little picnic.
Is it a grassy knoll?
Grassy knoll. Yeah.
Don't go to a grassy
Hopefully
knoll.
Not. Don't do that.
Yeah,
but I was thinking if I could make friends with all the neighbors, I'd set up like a movie night, Set up an outdoor projector, some nice speakers, but
make a video about it. Yeah.
There's going to be that one neighbor though who's like an old crotchety butthead, who's like, oh, he's an audiophile, and every time he hears like a noise, if it's just a thump from a garbage can hitting the wall, he's gonna be like, "Bass next door, I'm calling the cops."
Yeah, right.
Thomas is coming through, man.
Thank you so much for all the super chats. He has full size Martin Towers set to large. Sounds amazing. Highly recommended. I actually have my Oh crap! I actually have my ESL-X's that way as well. They're set to large. They got dual 8s, and they mesh really well with my Rel subwoofer. So I'm good on that. Like I like running them that way, and sometimes I'll set up music listening with the subs and just so like 2.1, with the ML towers.
Yeah.
And wife is calling. I'll be right back.
Go ahead, man. Do what you got to do.
Miss you already. Yeah.
Oh my goodness,
the
man.
crossover stuff. I think the best answer, maybe not the best answer, but like the best way to go about it is to just go ahead and spend the $90 and get the mini DSP U mic one, and then pair that with REW.
Yeah.
And then measure the response of the speakers in your room, and then play around with moving the subwoofer around in the room to see what works best, or the subwoofers around the room.
So there's definitely just some trial and error. So there's not a, hey,
no,
if
there's
you see
definitely
this.
yeah, there's definitely not a just set it to this and you're always there, because the room interacts so differently. The speakers are different and all that crap. So
Correct, man.
stereo sucks, man. At
Cool,
home.
man.
Can you guys hear my kids? Because I have that crisp on. So they're making noise, and if you can't hear them, then it's doing what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
You can see it back there.
You're good, man. Yeah, we can't hear them at all.
They're back there tearing stuff up. Like, new house, destroy.
I mean, it's got to be the same furniture. Why would they mess up the same furniture? But it looks like they're playing in the background. That's cool.
No, but that glitch that just happened is freaking me out right now, dude.
Oh, whoa.
It's a glitch in the Matrix.
Dude, it's a glitch in the Matrix.
Whoa.
The cat.
That's hilarious.
How you doing that,
GoPro?
Joe? How you doing
That's
that?
GoPro.
That's awesome, man.
Deja
What's up,
vu.
Tim?
What was it? Oh,
Yeah, good question. That was an awesome question.
yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, I think that requires a little bit more time because
And I
there's
think
a lot
one
of
thing
good
that's-
answers to it.
I think one thing that's important for everybody to understand is that we don't all have, even as content creators, we've been doing this a long time. We've been in home theater and 2-channel, but we don't have all the answers. I don't think any one of us try to claim like we are the source. I think it's great. I love learning from these guys because they have experiences and they have, knowledge that I don't have. And so I think, it's one of those things where I want to be a learner the rest of my life. I want to continue to learn. I want to continue to grow. I want to continue to even stretch my knowledge in the areas that I don't know about. And a lot of that has to do with, measurements and stuff. So definitely appreciate you guys kind of chiming in on that. And kind of while I'm talking, I just want to give a big thanks to all our patrons.